Sveiki visi, toliau tęsiam neredaguotą pokalbius ir jau kuris laikas anonsuotas ypatingas epizodas tiek neredaguotą vedėjui, tiek, manau, daugumai iš jūsų turėsim svečiuose neeilinį pašnekovą, ne kiekvieną dieną tenka pasišnekėti su JAV karininkais ir ypatingai tokio lygio, kalbu apie generolą atsargos Frederiką Benjaminą Hodgesą ir jisai 14-17 metais buvo Jungtinių Amerikos Valstijų sausumos pajėgų vadas Europoje ir Afrikoje. Tai dabar mes pereisim į anglų kalbą, o visiems linkiu gero klausimo. So let's switch to English. Welcome back everyone to our Let's Talk Europe episodes, and today we have a special guest, obviously who are following us on social media. Have seen, that we were announcing for a week already that we will have a Lieutenant General Ben Hodges, a retired general from US, who was in command of a very serious US military force, so United States Army Europe commanding general. So hello, General.
Hey, good morning, guys.
So obviously, I announced as the topic war in Europe, but we're probably gonna start the conversation from the war in Ukraine, which is to some extent the same probably. So the first question probably that I'm getting from most of my viewers in different forms is about the calculation of 3 days, and could you explain us how was it widespread, and this opinion that Ukraine is going to last for 3 days, and then we're going to see oblivion or whatever. What was the thought process behind all this?
Well, I think many people didn't know, and of course, if you don't know and you tend to echo something that sounds feasible or legitimate or fits your narrative. And there was a misperception about Russian capabilities, but also about Ukrainian capabilities. Let me say, I never worried about Ukraine. I knew that Ukrainian soldiers would be good. We had been training with them since 2015. And so I had seen the quality of the soldier and their determination, and especially their technical savvy and their innovation. I was a little bit surprised at the resilience of the Ukrainian population. I knew several outstanding women and men from the civilian side, but I didn't have a feel for the entire population. That was a very positive surprise. On the other hand, I was completely wrong about Russian capabilities. I had expected that they would be much, much better. I didn't believe it was possible that they could capture or they could win in 3 days. I mean, they could not drive and encircle Kyiv in 3 days, even if there was no resistance. I mean, I had just been in Kyiv a couple of weeks before this started, and you probably know it. I mean, the city
I've been to as well. So
it's difficult to drive there. I mean, so I couldn't even imagine soldiers, in 3 days encircling it. But we can go into more detail if you want, but I overestimated Russian capabilities. I knew that they were corrupt. I didn't realize how corrupt they were. And I failed to realize how unprepared they were for large-scale joint combined arms operations.
So since you mentioned Russia, so what in particular, because Vladimir Putin was always positioning Russian army as the second army in the world, and all those weapons that they claim have no analogies in the West. As a professional, how do you see, is it all fake hoax, or like cover up, or are there some, capabilities that we haven't seen maybe yet? Because what I'm trying to ask now, the main focus is like they can activate the nuclear weapons, but like in your opinion, from what we see, from all those, other weapons, maybe the nuclear weapon is also, just sitting there, without the capabilities of being launched. Of course, I'm over exaggerating a bit, but what would be your take on that?
Well, no, you're making a good point. Of course, the Russians have thousands of nuclear weapons, and they talk about it all the time. I mean, they've done that for years. They threatened half of the countries of Europe with a nuclear strike if they did something. So this, and this scared some people. And of course, our leaders have to take these kinds of threats seriously, because the Russians have shown that they don't care. They don't give a damn about human life, especially, from NATO countries or other European countries. So you have to take it seriously. But I think now, as I've been watching this for the past many months, I think that the likelihood of Russia using a nuclear weapon is very low. Number one, there's no real battlefield benefit to it. I mean, it won't. They're already using other weapons to kill innocent people, to destroy towns. So nuclear weapons would not do something better for them. And it would make it impossible for the United States or the UK to stay out. I mean, this would completely change the nature of the conflict. And of course, the United States would have to respond to any use of a nuclear weapon by Russia. That doesn't mean that they would respond with the US would respond with a nuclear weapon. There's a long list of other responses they could use that would be devastating for Russia. And I think the Russians realize this. And I think that the people around Putin, even though they are rabid in their support for him, and they're no better than him, I think, and from a moral standpoint, I think that they realize that he would be driving them over the cliff, and it would be the end of any hope they had for a Russian renaissance, if you will, after this conflict is finally over. So that's why I don't think it's likely that they would use a nuclear weapon. Now, so the problem that we have, I think the mistake that our administration has made has been that they have been too worried that Russia would use nuclear weapon or would escalate some other way. But we see now that the Russians cannot escalate. They have nothing else to do. I mean, there is no other thing that they can do. For 6 months, they have been fighting in Ukraine with almost everything they have, all their land forces at least, and they still have not been able to capture even 1/4 of Ukraine.
But the critics say they're slowly moving, and you can of course say that it's not efficient. They will run out of artillery or manpower or whatever, but they're still moving. So how should we see it? As a complete failure, or in their fighting technique, you say this is which is like no regret for their cost of human life. It's acceptable, and they are slowly achieving their goals, because we hear that from some of the analytic people globally.
Yeah, they are slowly moving backwards. You look at what's happening around Kherson. I mean, they are on the verge of losing thousands of soldiers. I mean, this is going to be a crushing defeat around Kherson, and it doesn't require a big offensive. But the Ukrainians have very cleverly trapped them there in Kherson. And so this is going to be, who knows, maybe the next 2, 3, 4 weeks, I'm not sure. That's going to be a significant defeat. The Russians do not have the ability to overrun Kharkiv. They'll never get to Kyiv. They'll never get to Odessa. And they will be fighting hard to hang on to what they have taken so far. Now, look, I don't want to overstate this, and a big caveat to what I'm saying is that the U.S. and the U.K. and other European countries have to deliver what they said they were going to deliver. That's important. And of course, the Russians are hoping, and they're betting, that we will all lose interest because of our own internal problems. The U.S., we have elections coming up in November. The UK is still looking for the new prime minister. Germans are worried to death about gas, and on and on and on. And so the Russians are counting on all of us reducing our support for Ukraine. If we stick together, then I am very confident that the Russians are going to crack. Their logistics system is exhausted. They have terrible manpower problems. They have terrible morale problems. They have terrible discipline problems. Their fleet is nowhere in the fight. Their fleet is hiding from Ukraine, which has no fleet. And the Russian Air Force will not fly over Ukraine. It stays over the air. It stays in the air over Belarus and Russia. So I think it's possible that by the end of this year, Russian forces can be pushed all the way back to a 23 February line if we stick with Ukraine.
Okay, I will just quickly come back to finish this nuclear topic. Like one of the things that we hear is like that if we corner Russia, then they can do something stupid, because most of the people do understand that Putin and his surroundings are not some kind of religious militants who want to die and meet their maker or whatever. So they are more like leisure style type of people. So they would not do that. But like this cornering Russia and as a general, can you explain to the listeners, like what would it take even in Russia to launch a nuclear strike? If Putin is off, he goes completely mad, what are the capabilities that is going to be done if he's pressing a button or whatever method is there to start this?
So first of all, I am sure that President Putin himself cannot just hit a button and start firing nuclear weapons. That there is a process around him, just the way there is around the American president, that you wake up, you're having a bad day, and you start firing missiles. I mean, there's a structure to prevent that. And so I would imagine that the professionals in the general staff and in the leadership in the Kremlin, no matter how evil they are, I don't think they want to blow themselves up, that they know what they can envision what the outcome would be. So that's one of the reasons I believe it's unlikely. But this idea that Russia is somehow cornered, this is a construct of the West, that somehow in Washington, some people, but also in some European capitals, people are concerned that, oh my God, if Russia starts losing, that they will, out of desperation, they will fire nuclear weapons. That is not a likely possibility in my view. Now, where they will, I think they would use a nuclear weapon. It's in their doctrine that if the motherland was threatened, the sovereign territory of Russia, if that's threatened.
But that's very very thin line, because they consider Crimea to be a motherland, and
very good point. Yeah,
and it's not motherland. It's obviously Ukraine, and nobody has kind of accepted this fake referendum. But how do you see this thin line?
Well, that's an excellent point that I was coming to. Part of warfare is information. It's not just about artillery and rockets and ships and planes and soldiers. It's economics, and it's information, and it's diplomacy also. And so I completely agree with President Zelensky's statement the other day that the war started with Crimea and it will end with Crimea. And of course, what that means is that this is not over until Crimea is returned to Ukrainian sovereignty. But he has also said, and I would agree, that probably to get Crimea back will be done through negotiations, diplomatic means, not a direct assault. So I kind of break it into two things. The first thing is back to the 23 February line. All right. And I think that's possible this year. It's feasible. I could be wrong, but it's feasible. And then the second part is to get back to the 2014 line. So Donbass and Crimea. And that's obviously that's going to take more time. But, if there's, first of all, pressure, get the entire world continue to condemn Russia for what it did, that nobody recognizes Crimea as being Russian except Russians and maybe Venezuela or North Korea. I mean, that's it. And so, and we've got to also find ways to put pressure on the Russian population. Right now, who knows, half of the Russian people are against the war, but they can't do anything about that. All right. But there's half that believe it, that completely support it.
When you say half of the population, do you have some intel from U.S. military?
No, this is purely my estimate based on, I mean, like you, I'm probably watching and looking and listening. Let me say it differently then, because I can't be precise. I cannot be precise. I think there are a lot of people that completely support the Kremlin. They completely believe and buy into everything that's said. Even Russians who live here in Germany or travel to other places, they believe it. So it's not like they don't have access to news. But I think that there are a lot of people that understand that they're losing what they have because of this war. And that's why it's so important that we find a way through all the different neighbors and every other means to convey to the Russian people what their government is causing, and it's got to hurt them. And until it begins to hurt all the citizens, they're going to believe the nonsense coming out of the Kremlin. They have to feel it the way European citizens feel the impact of this.
A bit off topic, but since you mentioned, I have to ask, in your opinion, how is it possible for Russians who are living in the West, and who has access to all sorts of media sources and everything else which is in the free world? How can you be a supporter of Kremlin and this position? Is it some kind of a psychological issue, or what would be that in your opinion?
Well, I have to say that even in my own country, we have millions of people that completely believe some incredible nonsense about
Absolutely
things that are going on. So I'm not surprised that there would be millions of Russians who would believe nonsense if there are millions of Americans that also completely, whether for religious reasons or economic reasons, or because they're not educated, or because they've lost trust in the government. And of course, this is exactly the target of the Kremlin, is to cause people to lose confidence. I mean, I've had conversations here in Germany with very smart, very well-educated people that completely believe the Russian narrative, or they don't trust the institutions. They think that all the media is fake, or that the government is trying to screw them, or I mean, there's so much disinformation, and so a big part of effective defense and security in Lithuania, in Germany, in the United States, in all of our countries, is what we call resilience of the society. And that means you have to regain the trust of the population. People have to trust the institutions, the media, the courts, the election process. These are things that they're under huge pressure in the United States right now. And so we've got a real battle at home, as well as against Russia.
Well, that's, of course, would be another huge topic. I'm not going to even try to poke it. So let's get back to Ukraine for a few more questions, and then we switch to Europe in general. So many analysts, and they say that this is an artillery war. That the West hasn't been prepared for such war because in Europe, for example, I mean the numbers, of howitzers, let's say in France, in Germany, even UK and the Scandinavia, it's not significant amount to what Russia has been storing for decades. Why do you think this happened? Is it planning issue, or this is some kind of other reasons? And should this war be an artillery war, or let's say Ukrainian pilots could change everything with US planes, and it would switch to modern or present day warfare that is like NATO style and the US style?
So, excuse me. First of all, for the last 20 years, we were fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan, and it was a different kind of war. And the European countries are also fighting in Mali. And I mean, so these were the type of operations we were doing, and artillery was not a critical part of that. And so, I mean, even when I was in Iraq and Afghanistan, many of the artillery units were used to do convoy security or other things. It just was not part of what was needed, not on a large scale. And of course, so you lose some of that skill and mentality, but also the ammunition is very expensive. And so if you don't think you're going to use it, then you don't make a lot of it. Now, in hindsight, that was a mistake, but I think there were not enough people that believed that we would ever have to do this. So multiple administrations in the US, but also in UK and Germany and other countries did not produce that capability that in the scale that we thought we would need. And now we're paying the price for it. The Russians, of course, have always believed in artillery for long before Putin. I mean, long before World War II, it was artillery army. And so they have a lot of it. Now, fortunately, they have quantity, but the quality is not that good. And a lot of their ammunition, I think, is older ammunition. The rockets are not precision rockets. They require hundreds of rockets to do what one HIMARS can do, for example. So, but still, they have advantage in numbers, which is significant. But I would say that we are learning fast. We started changing our training after I saw what the Ukrainians were doing against the Russians, and what warfare was looking like again. We began to change our training in Germany and back in the US to be prepared for that, for the mix of drones, artillery, rockets, electronic warfare, tanks, river crossings, all of these things that we would have to do again. So we can learn fast. We did, and I think the US is moving quickly to bring armor back into Europe again. As you know, we have an armor battalion that rotates through Lithuania quite a bit, as well as in Poland. And I think that it is going to take some time before our industry can get moving again to produce the quantity of what's required.
So will we see Ukrainian pilots flying, advanced weaponry from US? There was a question from one of our patrons: will we ever see F-35 in Ukraine soon? But what would you say? This kind of weaponry, is it possible that we will see this in this conflict, or it's unlikely?
Well, today I would never say anything is unlikely in terms of support. You know, I did say a Russian nuclear strike was unlikely, but when it comes to what the support the West, what the United States and others might provide to Ukraine, I would say that look where we were 6 months ago. 6 months ago, there were arguments about whether or not to provide more Javelin or to provide Stinger, because there was concern that somehow an American-made Stinger that was used to shoot down a Russian helicopter, the Russians would somehow escalate. I mean, that seems ridiculous now, but that's where we were 6 months ago. So we've been climbing the ladder of increasing support for the last 6 months, and here we are now. Obviously, HIMARS and other MLRS, the ARM anti-radar missiles that were just used. Those are excellent for knocking out air defense systems. So more and more capabilities are being provided. So I can imagine that we will see, I certainly hope we will see Ukrainian pilots in newer aircraft. I wouldn't guess on what type aircraft. For me, I try to stay away from talking about specific systems, and instead I think it's more useful to talk about capabilities that are needed. And the capabilities that Ukraine needs are long-range precision fire, the ability to hit.
When you say long range, are you talking about ATACMS or are you talking about only HIMARS?
No, I'm talking about a lot of different systems that have long range. So I don't want to name a specific thing, because
but I'm just talking about the range, you know, because 70 kilometers is fine, but 300 probably would be a game changer.
Well, what matters, forget the range. What matters is, can they destroy what causes all the problems? Okay, so that means hitting Russian artillery, Russian rockets, but also hitting the bases from which Russian Air Force takes off and launches cruise missiles wherever they are. That's what I mean, the capability, whether it's 40 kilometers or 240 kilometers or 500 kilometers. If an airplane takes off from somewhere in Russia and it launches a cruise missile that kills innocent Ukrainian civilians, then we should be giving Ukraine the ability to hit where it came from. So I think the White House, I think, should change the policy to give Ukraine those capabilities, because the Russians, they talk about escalation, they can't. I don't believe they can escalate other than to a nuclear weapon. And so Ukraine should be able to hit airfields like that, or to hit the Sevastopol, so that the Black Sea Fleet cannot operate from there anymore.
So just finishing off the Ukrainian topic. So this counteroffense that it's possible, in your opinion, until the end of the year. Do you think it's gonna happen like with the same weaponry just building up, or something is even gonna increase the capabilities of Ukrainians before they are gonna go on counteroffense?
Well, look, I think that the Ukrainian General Staff has done a good job of protecting information. You know, what we call OPSEC, operational security. We know more about what the Russians are doing than what the Ukrainians are doing, and that's exactly how it should be. So if the public knows too much about what Ukraine is doing, then of course the Russians will know. I imagine that Ukrainian General Staff is waiting for the conditions to be right to launch some sort of a major counterstrike somewhere, and they're building up ground forces, but also, to get the conditions right, they have to keep knocking out Russian artillery, Russian rockets, keep pushing those ammunition storage places further back. I believe that the Russian logistics system is exhausted. I mean, they are seriously on their last legs. The ability to bring parts and fuel and replacements and all that is under huge pressure. And so Ukraine will keep doing that until they think the time is right, when then they could, in fact, launch some sort of a large counterattack. Who knows when that will be? I would expect in the next few weeks, perhaps, but I don't know for sure. I do believe, though, that the Russian units, they're weak. So many leaders have been killed, and in a centralized system where the leader decides everything, when the leaders are gone, now you've got untrained soldiers, undisciplined soldiers without their officers. And so that's why I believe the potential is there for them to collapse, as long as Ukraine is able to keep that pressure.
Okay, so let's have a few questions about Russia, because obviously we understand that in the global security architecture, Russia was a very important piece. And what do you think is the future of this architecture, where it's heading, and what are the consequences, for the whole world if, let's say, Russia is out of this puzzle?
That's an interesting question, and I think that the current regime in Russia is not feared by people anymore. It's not respected by most people. I think that we're looking within the next 5 years that Russia, as we know it today, will be changed significantly. I can imagine a situation where what some people call the Balkanization of Russia, that pieces start coming off. I think like Chechnya, we hear it all the time. The Chechens are thinking this could be their opportunity. Transnistria and South Ossetia, these other places like that, Transnistria, places that have been taken by the Russians. I can envision within a few years those pieces. And then, of course, across Russia, Russia today on the map is mostly a colonial empire that was built over centuries. And it's those ethnic groups, they're the ones that are paying the price for Russia's war. That's where most of the casualties are happening, not soldiers from Moscow or St. Petersburg, but they're happening out in the ethnic areas. So I think the Russian
Burats are gonna get angry and split, yeah.
The Russian military has been exposed as being weak and corrupt. I think that within 5 years, how many people really will depend on Russian gas and oil? How many nations are seriously going to spend their money on Russian weapons, which have been shown to be not quite so good? And of course, for sophisticated weapons, you've got to typically, there's a contractor, there's maintenance, there's all the things that come with this airplane or this tank or rocket launch, whatever. Okay. As long as sanctions are in place, Russia cannot repair their own equipment. How are they going to repair brand new equipment that they sell to somebody else? So I think, and then of course, as you know, Russia has a small population for the size country. It's a small population, and it's unhealthy. And I think that they've got a lot of negative trends, and it's hard to imagine 5 years from now Russia looking like it does today.
But here is the same argument that any kind of disintegration of Russia is considered to be dangerous because they have a lot of nuclear weapons. What will happen with them? It's easier to talk about Yugoslavia model, or other mentioned, because there wasn't this component. How would you, as a professional, see this as an issue? Is it possible to manage that kind of, nuclear threat that would, go into the hands of who knows what?
Yeah.
Who?
No, this is a very important question. And the reason I bring this up is because I think it's important that we begin to think about this as a real possibility. the breakup. We were not prepared for the breakup of the Soviet Union. Everybody was thrilled, obviously, that Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania regained their independence, and that the Warsaw Pact countries got out from underneath the Soviet domination. But the West was not truly prepared in economic terms and in diplomatic terms, and we hadn't thought through the consequences. Of course, I was totally surprised. So now I think it is important that we start thinking, what does happen if it collapses again? If Russia collapses somehow? Well, and of course, you're right. The nuclear weapons accountability, where are they? And how do you control them? But also, where's all the money? Who controls all the gas? And I mean, all these different things we would need to think through. And of course, there will be huge numbers of refugees, people flowing towards Lithuania and Poland and other countries. So it's not going to be apocalypse, or the end of the world, but we need to think through what this might look like. And look, Russia is there's so many reasons that we all would need Russia to be stable, to be a contributing member of the global community, because it has enormous resources. Where it sits, of course, affects the Arctic, which is going to become more and more navigable in coming years. There's a lot of reasons that we would want Russia to be stable and responsible. So I'm not advocating for the breakup. I'm advocating that we are prepared to help with a transition that benefits everybody.
Well, it's hard to transition some place which has never seen a democratic daylight. But yeah, this is a huge topic that we could touch on. If we start for the finish, I want to ask really about the European, this newest members of NATO and the European Union, and what would you see their part? We're obviously. We feel the most danger when it comes to Russia, and we would like more U.S. troops here. We would like to more, allies, bases, and permanent bases. What do you think, like in this policy shift, from deterrence to defense? How is it going to be moving, like in the nearest future?
So I also would like to see more U.S. troops in Europe. I'm glad that we have up to 100,000 now, which is 20,000 more than it was just 6 months ago. Of course, most of these are rotational, but I would like to see more permanent also, because we got too small. When I was the commander, we had only 30,000 Army, and that was way too small. But I think our alliance is awake now. NATO is serious about deterrence and defense. You can see so many improvements in so many different areas of what NATO does over the past year. And I think you're going to see continued investment in modernization of defense, but also reducing dependence on Russia for energy. This is an important part of European security and stability. I think the U.S. administration is much more pro-Europe and recognizes that the European Union is our most important trading partner. And so getting that economic relationship healthy again is also an important part of this. I think that Germany has an important role to play. I know Germany is getting and deserves a lot of criticism for First, its dependence on Russia and its unwillingness to rock the boat with Russia over the past years. And I think that contributed to the situation we're in now. But Germany is a country that we all need to play an important role inside the European Union, inside NATO. I think Germans are finally coming to the realization that they have to accept responsibility. If you're the richest country in Europe and the largest economy in Europe, then you have responsibility to help with security and stability and to provide leadership. And it feels like there's finally a growing debate in Germany about the need to do that, to stop hiding behind history, but to accept responsibility. Now, of course, China is watching all of this. China is probably not very happy with Russia, their so-called friend, because Russia has awakened the West before China was ready, I think. And so the Chinese are watching to see if we cannot stop Russia, then they will not be impressed with anything we say about Taiwan. I don't think that they're going to invade Taiwan right now. I think they're still 2, 3, 4 years away from having the ability. They're going to threaten, but they're not going to do it. I think President Xi has a lot of problems inside China right now. So Europe has to stick together. The United States and Europe have to stick together to ensure trade, protection of intellectual property, compliance with international law. That only happens if Europe and the United States stick together and force China, force Russia, and force others to live up to international law, which means finally that we have to do that too. We have to live up to our own talking points. We have to do what is right. We the West have to be the example of respect for international law, respect for human rights, respect for the institutions of liberal democracy.
General, I see that our time is running out. Of course, there are millions of questions left, but hopefully we can catch you some other time. So it was a great opportunity to talk to you. Thank you so much.
It was my pleasure, and I like your format. I like your attitude, and I can imagine you have a large audience that listens to what you have to say. I'll be in Lithuania in the fall. I would love to have the chance to meet you in person.
Absolutely. We will do everything, to arrange that talk live. So thank you so much. Thanks everyone who are watching. Don't forget us on social media and please support, and see you in the next Let's Talk Europe episode.